Hello, everyone. Great to be here on Friday afternoon. I'm going to talk about a subject that's not new. We all do this in different guises and different forms. We've touched on this at our universities for a number of years, number of decades probably. I personally feel there's never been a time where there's a greater need for these kind of assessments. I'm going to go through a number of areas of my own doctoral research and papers and book chapters and what have you. I've taken extracts, some of the rationale, pedagogic underpinnings, but I'm going to talk about a model that universities could consider, probably at a subject, school, maybe even faculty level. We start off with this tiny bit about myself. I spent about nearly 30 years in industry. So I've worked for IBM, Sage, Infor, had a couple of my own businesses. But I've also spent 19 years doing 50% fractional job. Sorry, let me have a drink. Excuse me, doing a fractional job at De Montfort University. Don't ever do that. Don't ever do 1.5 jobs unless you've got a really understanding family, because it nearly kills you. But I knew I was going to bring all of my corporate knowledge and the recruitments of graduates for over 23 years into academic life, which I've done and fully integrated. So in the recruitment of students, there have been many years when I've recruited really nice people, really bright people, bright graduates. But when I asked the question, what part of your learning would help you fix my problems next quarter, very, very few people could do it. Yes, we have placement years, and I knew within 5 minutes of someone, even without reading their CV or LinkedIn profile, I knew just by the way the student articulated themselves and their experience, without being too specific, I just knew whether they'd had that year out. But not all year outs are fantastic. So this approach is a way of considering what could be potentially a replacement, a proxy for that potential year out. And I've just put a summary here. I won't read through it necessarily. But so it's an opportunity for universities to consider a new framework for authentic assessments. It isn't just commercial, although my research was based on commercial areas. Already there are a number of areas at university. You think about nursing specifically, where students and nursing education students absolutely have to go through that incredibly authentic practice. So just some of the, let's move to the next slide. So some of the rationale. We've got students coming out of university, COVID affected, remote learning impacted. A number of students I know from colleagues at other universities, graduates, that don't want to get full-time jobs. They want a breather after graduating. And I know, again, for a number of Midlands universities where students are, even maybe a year out, are still just wanting to do part-time jobs at the moment. We've got generational influence, Gen Z, where we've got students taking notes on their phone faster than they can write. We've got the technology influence in all sorts of commercial life, as well as other areas at university. Technology is taking over. We've all faced with the problems of ChatGPT, although I know, again, for a number of colleagues, there's a big move towards something more practical, whether it's mini Viva, it's a voiceover, PowerPoint presentation. It's partly back to maybe some exams in a small way, something that can't be replicated with AI. Student satisfaction and reward, very important for universities. Getting students engaged, maybe in the formulation of some of their assignments, but actually something that's really rewarding and employability relevant rather. So which leads on to ASCSB. We've got at my own university the TEF influence, so woven into the curriculum. A lot of universities over the past 10 years have really moved this way to weaving that employability in the curriculum. And just very lastly, a lot of students, statistically, there's a big move from students moving away from the big corporate graduate schemes. They're deciding where they want to go. We've got some great big companies like Apple, Google, Microsoft, Hewlett Packard that are taking on as many people on apprenticeships as they are with degrees. Now, that may horrify people thinking, no, I'm going to lose so many students. It is maybe a trend possibly in the IT area and a couple of other areas, things like engineering and what have you. So there's an equally big trend in students moving towards small to medium-sized enterprise, up to 250 employees. And it's that sweet spot that I think that universities could really benefit from, with having an authentic assessment, not just in the capstone project, the kind of alternative to the dissertation, but actually having it as part of their very fabric. Some of the pedagogic underpinnings, won't read through every single area. Performance assessment, so Hart and Torrance really started this, and Newman and Archbold 92. So components of authentic assessment. And again, I talked about a lot of universities, whether it's commercial or engineering area or not, will have these elements. It's really important for students, as we know, to feel engaged with the assessment, that they've actually benefited from the assessment, and more importantly, that they can actually use their learnings. One of the things that I do at De Montfort, with a lot of the new recruits and colleagues in my faculty, I talk to them, especially ones who have relationships and employability briefings and classes to final year students. I talk to them about if they're ever giving some sort of guidance on CVs and use of their actual learning, and that's whitewashed amongst all academics at De Montfort, that they must remember when an employer is speaking to them, the assessment is far more important than actually the module they learned. And a lot of universities don't appreciate this. In employers and interviewers' eyes, and this is in my old role and many colleagues at different companies, it's almost a 25% what they've learned, but it's how they've actually applied it, the challenges they've faced, what could they do with that actual knowledge in the future. It's almost that scenario, very simply, of I've learned this. Yeah, I've learned A, B, C, X, Y, Z. And actually, do you know what? Companies don't care about assessment and achievement rates. They really don't. Maybe the top elite companies will, but the vast majority don't. So for a student that says, yeah, I learned A, B, C, X, Y, Z and got good marks, I've learned this, but I've actually done this, consider it sort of a small consultancy, this small live assessment. I've learned this, I've done this, and if I got the job, I could do this for you tomorrow. That's what employers need to hear. So, and just lastly, Cumming and Maxwell, so different interpretations. They looked at the appropriateness of the assessment tasks as indicators for independent learning outcomes. It's that independent learning that a lot of employers, they like to hear when students talk about, we didn't have much briefing from our lecturer on this assessment. I had to go out and find the knowledge myself. These were the challenges, but this is what I achieved. That's real gold for employers. And I think a lot of students, they veer away from that. So let me go to the next slide then. So again, just some more pedagogic stuff. I think O'Leary out of Nottingham, there was in 2017, some really good stuff come out there. And just lastly, looking at the model, so individual job demands, organizational developments. There are some areas in here, so tasks, functions, roles. As universities, it doesn't need people that have come per se from industry. Everyone has some sort of business connections. And again, what universities don't realise, a lot of universities, is businesses love having on their, say, their credibility decks. If we talk about, agencies, small businesses, the consultancies themselves, they love being able to say that they provide guidance. They work with a certain university. It's a badge in their own right. It's almost like in industry, of course, everyone asks, what did you get in your undergraduate degree? For a master's degree, no one ever asks. No one ever asks. And I don't think universities realise this. Not that the grade is unimportant, but no one ever asks. Occasionally, I've been asked, what was it in? I did my MSc in. I've never been asked where I did it. And I've certainly never been asked in 28 years, what grade did I get? Anyway, I just wanted to put that model up as important influence. So this really, the genesis of the research came from a number of qualitative, semi-structured interviews. I looked at 3 different cohorts. Cohort 1, so 25 SMEs, and these are about an hour and a quarter calls. 25 SMEs, less than 250 employees. They had to have employed 5+ graduates previously. So I wanted them to be some tangibility, some understanding of the onboarding graduates, the fact that they don't have the luxury of the classic 12-month, 18-month graduate rotation scheme, that people were almost in the company, linked up with a buddy, given the rules, a bit of a briefing and a couple of weeks, and you're in. You need to be adding value quickly. Cross-industry, UK-based, sourced from business contacts and Federation of Small Business members. Cohort 2, so graduates, had to have graduated in the past 5 years. Cross-industry, they had to have some sort of commercial study. And again, source graduate contacts and LinkedIn contacts. It wasn't just people that had graduated from De Montfort. It was widespread. There was, I think, out of the sample, out of the 25, it was only about 3 that were. And then lastly, the academics. And I had to be kind of cautious here in that there was a number of academics I knew that would think you're an imposter still, David Gordon. You're wanting to turn the academic assessment is something too contextual and too FE, which is the opposite of what I was doing. I was trying to make it really relevant, the old adage of theory to practice. So the basis for the research came from this, so data collected from this areas. And some of the key things that came out of it. So I looked at, for the SMEs, how relevant do you feel the students' learning and especially assessments have been for your business? And it's at assessments. Now, we don't know where students are going to graduate to. We don't know what companies, what industry, what geography. So one thing I did a number of years ago, so 7 years ago when I left industry, I'd done quite a bit of research around companies that I'd worked for, but also we on an employability aspect. I used to do 1 day a month recruiting wherever I was working, but they used to swap all the divisions at IBM they would swap recruitment for best practice with other companies. So I've worked with lots and lots of companies. Well, I did quite a bit of research on what are the main tasks that you need graduates to do, and this is not just in commercial areas, but all, whether it's finance, whether it's straight data, computing, what have you. What are the main tasks that you need, the big chunky bits of work that you need graduates to work on in their first 2 years? So I collected a huge amount of data, put it through various different, so put it through SPSS. We had a number of clusters come out of this. And I finalized with some major big projects, and I briefed people in my faculty and said, look, we need to prepare students to do these sorts of projects. There is a concept that says why don't we simply match whatever the businesses want people to do? Generally, we make our assessments similar to this. So in one particular area, a couple of commercial functional areas at De Montfort, we did exactly that. And we really saw an impact with not only recruitment, but with just straight interviews, with the feedback from students. It was incredible. So first one was relevance. How closely do graduate learning and assessments provide real knowledge and practice? Some of the answers are quite stark with that. And graduate ability to explain the relevance of what they learned. How relevant was their degree and their modules to the particular job? And this comes back to that sort of impact. And then for the actual graduates, so skills do you most want to learn? I also looked at the attractiveness to recruiters when they'd been through a number of interviews. What skills did they find that were the hooks for interviewers? And maybe it was LinkedIn profile, elements that they talked about on LinkedIn profiles and CVs. And then around authentic assessments, their own idea of that. And then lastly, for the academics, so I wanted to know the familiarity with SMEs, and this is where I had to be kind of cautious. We all know in a lot of areas, the way that pedagogy is formed is around big businesses. It isn't, I'm kind of reserving this. I feel that maybe this is a 20, 30 years ago feeling that all graduates want to work for the biggest businesses and go to the capital of any country. It's moving rapidly away from that. And then, so translation of SME needs to actual assessments and the output of your modules. I wanted to know to what extent, and this is really important, to what extent could their assessments be placed on LinkedIn? Now, if you've done graphics or design or those sort of creative courses, 99% of what you've done, you're able to place on your LinkedIn profile. Okay, there may be some IP and what have you, or digital content that's just too sizable. But employers, they can see what you can actually do. And I've talked to a number of colleagues at different universities, and we've had casual conversations about this, and they've said, actually, there's not much that could be placed that could instantly show what a student could do in that first couple of months. And then lastly, really important question, which covered all three, the need for a placement year substitute. We know that placement years are valued by the university, especially by employers and by students. But it takes so much time and effort. And I know from a number of universities, they're trebling, quadrupling their teams to build up for this, for the graduate intake. And it's a struggle. It is really hard work. So the question is there a proxy? Is there a parallel to that kind of placement year experience? And it is with authentic assessments. So I've put a spectrum of different assessments that I'm involved in. So at the one hand, we've got a DMU investigative assessments. So this is the actual business side of De Montfort University. There are areas where they need input, they need fresh ideas, they need a bulk of people to do the same thing. And then what we do is take the top 5%, strip away any personal information, and give those proposals elements to that particular functional area. And it's reciprocal, the benefits, obviously. Placement year assessments we've introduced very much actually in placement year assessments, rather than it just be obligatory couple of visits, couple of reports. Very strong in placement year assessments. Live situation assessments. So this is the core of, if we think about individual module assessments, we've introduced those totally for 3 programs where every single assessment is based on that live situation. We'll have group remote, so live projects where students aren't on site, but they work remotely, almost like a remote consultant. As many times I dealt with consultancies in corporate life, I wouldn't want them to be my best pal and buy me a coffee every hour. I'd want them to do the work and report in sort of every couple of weeks. And then lastly, so live individual in-house based projects where students are based maybe 3-4 days a week, unpaid, but actually getting that tangible experience, so a spectrum. And then nearly lastly, so the live situation assessment, the middle one of these. So where we've introduced this to a number of programs, what it's taken is, and I'll work with the subject leader, what it's taken is an approach to the module leaders to say, these are your pedagogic underpinnings, these are your learning outcomes that are fixed in concrete, this is the blueprint, we're not trying to alter that. What we're saying is we want this underneath the layer of a live context, and we'll talk to them about a particular industry, a particular situation. And the blue area in the middle, I myself and a couple of the colleagues spend a lot of time networking with businesses, different business organizations, and we'll pick and choose different projects. Sometimes they're great projects, but they happen at the wrong time. It's just not live enough. There is a pro forma, that heads of agreement that the organisation sign. That is very simply they'll do at least a couple of recorded messages, or a Teams call, but obviously best if it's face to face. And they'll do a follow up one a few weeks into the assessment. There's very little business engagement, business involvement up front, but there is engagement with the students. So again, the benefit for the students is that live, real business engagement. And we have a number of companies attached to them. It is quite intensive, work intensive, but we've got the model really working with a couple of subject areas. So I'm really happy that students are getting benefit from this, and the feedback we're getting, it is tremendous, really, really beneficial feedback. We want engagement, we want higher NSS scores, we want better student satisfaction. So that's it in a nutshell. And I talked about LinkedIn ready assessments, really important. I know as a previous grad employer, I'd spend 8 seconds looking, 8-10 seconds max looking at a CV. No one ever lies on LinkedIn. People tell the truth. And there's not the page limit of the amount of stuff, and you can put something digital on there. People go straight to LinkedIn. Our assessments need to be, and this is not just in the commercial area, whole scale, they need to be LinkedIn ready. So thank you very much for that. That's my email if anyone wants to ask questions. I also run a consultancy, Business Engage, around co-created curriculum with the business, and then authentic assessments.